and I also keep a list of characters, because I get confused about my own characters. Isn't that ridiculous?
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I mean, I lose track of who done it in our
Yes,
murder mysteries. We've got that
yes,
many of them.
yes.
So it must be really hard to remember what your characters have done.
It can be, and particularly characters who have a very small part, like let's say a barman in a pub or something who's called Jimmy or Tom or something, and he's imparted some crucial piece of information. So you have to then the police maybe come back to him later to clarify, or pump him for a little bit more or something like that. And then you sort of start thinking, well, who's this Tom fella? Where did he come in, or was it Jimmy, or was it Fred? So it's you do have to write them down and track them remorselessly. And I think one of the most appalling things, and it's happened in some books that I've read from other authors, where they haven't done that, and you've come across somebody on page 173 who's supposed to have appeared originally on page 44, but it's a different name.
Ah, gosh.
That's dreadful, because well, it just puts you off.
It does, doesn't it? Yes, yes. So do you have a notebook for each book then?
No, it's a continuum, one very big notebook, and keep going. And that's useful as well, because as the characters flow through from one to the other, it can be useful. For example, Maureen Lyon's sister is Sheila, who is still in possession of what was the family farm from way back when. And she comes in just occasionally. Herself and her family come in to the story. So it's handy to be able to look back and say, well, what's Sheila's daughter's name, and what's her husband's name, and this kind of thing, So it's all in the one book.
And do you actually write down their characteristics as well? If
Not
you've
so
given
much.
them some particular...
Yeah, I tend to remember that by and large. I don't really have to write down a description of the character. That sort of seems to be in my head.
Right, yeah. That's very interesting, though. I love the idea of having case files on your characters.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so you can keep track of them.
I
Yeah.
find it's very useful, and it seems to work well in the books if you include quite a lump of backstory for the main characters. So even the perpetrators, I try and paint a picture of what their background is and where they've come from and why they are where they are. What circumstances have led them to commit the crime, and so on, as opposed to just, having them there doing the thing and then that's that. And you can develop quite interesting backstories, and even that, if I have got a character who has committed a crime, and you can even bring him forward into, or her forward into, the next book as well, if you want to.
Yeah, because of course, I suppose even the villain of the piece has got some shade and redeeming features. They're not
Definitely.
all...
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to be able to build a backstory that you can draw on for that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I love that idea. I really do.
Yeah.
So you were saying earlier that you'll sketch out the first couple, or you'll have the first couple of chapters in your head, but then the characters take over and draw the story or drive the story forward.
Yes.
How does that happen?
Oh, a bit of alchemy, I think. Yes, it's. I think the characters, particularly the sort of lead characters that are in all of the books, like the little team of detectives and their superiors and the people that they interact with, like the pathologists and the forensic people and so on. I think that they have become very strong. I mean, I could describe each one of them in minute detail. If anybody asked me to, everything from their taste in food to the way they dress to, what they like to do in their spare time, all that kind of thing. So that they've become very much alive in my mind.
Right.
And, it's almost like your imaginary friend, except there's rather a lot of them. But, so when I'm talking about Sinead Loughran, for example, who's the forensic girl, who turns up at all these murder scenes and, gets down to the nitty-gritty with the evidence. She's a very gregarious, pretty young girl who, somehow manages to distance herself from the horrors of what she's looking at on a more or less a daily basis. And she's very cheerful. She likes a glass of wine. Herself and Maureen Lyons go out on a girly night quite often and talk about the men and and all that kind of thing. So they're very much alive. So when if they're sort of knocking on the screen saying, "Here, I have something to say here. Come on, let me in," then you can write a bit about that. So yeah, in fact, in response to one of your questions here, what are tips for writers? Writers write, okay? Plumbers plumb, drivers drive, teachers teach, writers write. And if you ain't writing, you're not a writer.
Mm.
So,
No.
the blank page is a daunting piece of equipment, or the blank screen. But, as my brother used to say, a page never refused ink. So
I like that one as well. Yeah, definitely. So let's move on to the top tips for budding and aspiring writers. I would be very interested to hear what your top tips are and why they are your top tips as well.
Well, I suppose it's a little bit cheeky pretending to be some kind of an authority, but
I think after 14 books, you probably can.
Okay. Well, the first top tip is what I've just said. It seems obvious, but write. You must write. And if you're not writing, I mean, I've heard of people who have spent 4 or 5 years writing a novel, and crikey, it's unless it's War and Peace or something like that, it's or Anna Karenina or one of those, it shouldn't take that length of time. And I would find that I'd find that very difficult, because you'd have to reread the story every time you sat down to write another few pages. But anyway, so get on with writing. And it's a funny thing, I am actually writing 3 books at the moment.
No.
Yes. Now, there's one main one, which will be the next Galway Homicide book. But I've started another one in the Dublin series, and I'm about 10,000 words into that. And then I have a completely one-off book, which I'm writing, about a poor unfortunate man who's found not to be alive when his plane lands in Dublin. And that's getting underway as well. Now, I'm not writing sort of the 3 of them in complete parallel. I write one book for a considerable time, and then I might move over to another one and do a bit more on that and come back to the other, and so on. But and I didn't do the first 10 books like that at all. But I do find that as I get towards the end of a book, maybe 3/4 way through, the next book comes in.
Oh.
The next plot is knocking on the head and looking for attention as I'm getting towards the end of which may account to some extent for the pace to speak of. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, we're supposed to.
I've never heard of anyone doing that before. I'm sure there are others, but yeah, that's fascinating.
It's an odd phenomenon, yes. Now, the next tip is, this is really, everybody should take this on board. Do not be discouraged, right? I was terribly fortunate that the first publisher that I approached took my work, and that's unusual, or so I'm told.
Yes.
Many writers get tens and tens of rejections. I mean, J.K. Rowling was rejected 12 times before her books were taken by a publisher. I bet they're not too happy with themselves. But
yeah, someone who picked it up off the slush pot
exactly.
may well not be in a job now.
Perhaps not, or maybe he's working in Tesco's or something on the checkout. But anyway, you have to be persistent. And I'm not sure that, some people in desperation go into the world of self-publishing, say, well, if nobody else wants this, I'll do it myself. You need to research that one very carefully, because it's fraught. There's a lot of traps. Now, you'll be dealing with that a little bit later on in the series, I think.
That is the plan, yes. Yeah.
That'll be the time to talk about all the gotchas that are lurking there for self-publishers. But and there are some that have done very well from it. But it's a hard one, I think.
Do you think, though, that some people self-publish in the hope that a traditional publisher will see it and think, actually, that's worth picking up and publishing ourselves?
They may well do, but I don't think that actually happens.
Oh, right.
I think
Right.
the publishers allegedly receive hundreds of manuscripts every month.
Mm,
I've spoken to some of them, and they're just snowed under with manuscripts,
mm.
most of which, as you say, go to the slush pile. And with that amount of material coming at them, they don't have to go looking.
Of course.
Now,
Yeah.
if they saw a self-published book that had got to, won some kind of an award or something like that, then they might be tempted, perhaps, to go after that author.
Mm.
But I think, to be honest with you, self-publishing is one way of going, and traditional publishing is a different way. Now, clearly, the royalties in self-publishing, if you get it right or better, you get more of a percentage. But getting it right, that's the thing. Getting it right.
So actually being guided by a publisher is perhaps better anyway.
Well, they're two different businesses, which I found took me a little bit of time to process that. Writing is writing and publishing is publishing, and near the twain shall meet in one way, although that sounds very odd. But I mean, publishing is an absolute business of marketing, market penetration, building lists, exposure for your authors, book fairs, all that sort of stuff, social media management, all those things which an author really, you don't have time for that. At least I don't. Too busy writing. And okay, so we sacrifice a slice of the pie to the publisher, but they deserve it in most cases. And and why not? They do all the publicity, the promotion, and a lot of the work on the manuscript itself in terms of editing and proofreading. So
when you say don't get discouraged, once you've written your manuscript, would you just keep sending it, or then stop if it's got nowhere and tweak it and then send it again? Or
what I would do is I would research again, back to research the publishers very carefully and find out, does my book, first of all, is it aimed at the kind of manuscripts that this particular publisher publishes?
Right.
And you can do that quite easily on Amazon. If you take a book that you've written and you go looking on Amazon for similar titles, and you see who's publishing those titles, and you can go that way. There's absolutely no point sending young adult material into somebody who only publishes true crime or something like that. What is the point? So you're just making work for yourself and raising your expectation that something good might happen when it definitely isn't going to. So you need to research the publishers carefully. Also, it's hard to, there are only small windows when publishers are actually accepting submissions. So they accept submissions for a couple of months, they get completely deluged, and then they don't accept submissions while they work their way through the pile. So you need to, there's no point sending a submission to a publisher that isn't accepting a submission. What's the point?
Right. And is that something that you would find on their website?
Yes.
Right.
Would indeed.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if the publisher has submission guidelines, and they nearly all do, you have to stick to them rigidly.
Right.
So that will determine the format that they want to receive the manuscript in, possibly the line spacing and font that is used, the accompanying materials such as the author's bio, and all that kind of stuff. So if you don't stick to the guidelines, it just gives the publisher another reason to put it in the circular file. So if you're going to get to the top of the pile, you have to follow the rules. And I've spoken to lots of authors who haven't done that. They've just taken their manuscript, very excited with their achievement, and sent it off. No covering letter, no bio, no nothing, and never heard anything, and were surprised. It's a business, so you follow the business rules.
Right. Okay, that's a good one. Thank you.
Sorry, the last tip I have, it's a technical issue. Now, this is maybe just a hobby horse of mine, but I suspect it'll chime with some of your watchers, your viewers. When you're writing a story, a writer has an inclination to use the same words or word groups in close proximity within the story. So you get a
Right.
phrase and you find the phrase repeated twice or three times on the same page. Now, this irritates the reader, right?
Right.
Readers
Okay.
don't like it. So during the editing process, you need to weed those out. And as I went on to say here, English is a very rich language. There's always another word,
Mhm.
plenty of words you can use. So, be quite fastidious about that. The editor will pick up a lot of it, hopefully. But it's quite irritating for a reader to see the same expression used over and over in close proximity.
Right.
It's a style thing.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Now you mention it, I can see exactly what you mean. Yes, we
Yes.
all have certain words that we use and
Yes.
phrases that we
That's
use.
right. And
Um,
maybe too often in the case of writing a book. And I mean, finally, I suppose the last one, and this is really more for the publisher, but mistakes in books are horrible.
mm,
Um, you've got continuity errors where somebody turns up in a place where they can't be because they were somewhere else 2 minutes ago. You've got naming errors where somebody's name changes mysteriously through the book. You've got typographical errors, which are a menace, of course. And again, I have that enormous volume, which is the style guide, the Chicago Style Guide book, on my bookshelf, and I quite often have to refer to that. If you're looking for something terribly interesting to do someday, have a go at the Oxford comma, right?
okay.
The Oxford comma. That's where you have a list of this and that and the other and something else, and the comma comes before the last element of the list, or not, depending on your style. But again, consistency in those kind of things. And you might think, well, heavens, that's not important. It's the story that matters. But when you're reading, particularly on a Kindle, these things jump off the page and hit you in the eye.
Yeah.
Then you begin to lose, the book begins to lose credibility.
Yes, you almost lose confidence in the writer, don't you? Is
You
the
do,
story really going to deliver?
exactly. How has this
Yeah.
happened? It's the black spot on the white page. It sticks out, and
Yeah.
and it's hard to get rid of every typo. And
Yes.
I have found, strangely, that publishers don't actually like to be told when there are errors in their books. They get a bit cross about that. But there you go.
Right. Okay. Oh, well, actually, those are 4 tips there.
4 tips, yes.
So that's fantastic. So thank you very much. Yes, more bang for our buck there. So that's marvelous.
It's a little bit technical in parts, but it's if you're going to take it seriously, nice to get it right.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all that information. It's been fascinating talking to you, and lots of information for aspiring writers, but lots of information about your books and your writing process as well for the readers as well. So I shall have to be going off and finding one of your books on the Kindle now.
Please, yes, find them all.
Which one would you most recommend?
Well, because it was the first, and it's not the best written, I have to confess, but Murder on the Old Bog Road is the one that's closest to my heart. But I'm told by the publisher particularly that the books have developed, my writing has developed over the 3 years that I've been doing it, and the later ones are better. But that's his view. If you want to get a better one, the latest one, which is this one here, Murder in a Safe Haven, is quite nuanced. There's quite a complex plot going on. And
well, do you know, I think I might just have to read both and
I
just
think you might.
see the difference. Yes, yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for talking to Mugshots, and good luck with the next book.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for hosting it. I enjoyed it greatly.